Welcome back to Crime Time, Inc. Today, we're revisiting a case that I think really shocked Britain, the murder of Jill Dando. Most people will remember her as that kind of warm and familiar face for shows like Crime Watch and Holiday.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, she was a household name.
And what makes this case so unsettling is that she was shot in broad daylight, right outside her home in Fulham, on April 26th, 1999.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so hard to comprehend. Someone so well known, murdered in such a public way. And the fact that despite a massive investigation spanning decades, Jill Dando's murder still remains unsolved, even 25 years later.
Yeah, it's strange to think that someone could just, get away with something like that. What do we actually know about what happened that morning?
Well, we know that Dando had spent most of the day at her fiance's house, so her return to her home in Gowan Avenue around 11:30 a.m. was unexpected. This detail has led some experts, like investigative journalist Mark Williams Thomas, to suggest that the killer must have known she was going home that day, indicating premeditation.
Oh, so it's one a random crime then?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it. Picture this. Dando parks her car, walks to her front door, and as she's getting her keys out, the attacker strikes, forces her to the ground, presses the gun to the back of her neck, and fires a single shot.
And her fiancé at the time was Alan Farthing. He was a well-respected gynecologist, and they were just a few months away from their wedding. What a horrible turn of events.
Absolutely. And the impact on those closest to her family, Alan, her colleagues at the BBC. I mean, they had to cope with this sudden and senseless loss while the whole country mourned.
I remember reading that a neighbor actually reported hearing the shot, but by the time anyone got to her, it was too late. A passerby found her about 15 minutes after the attack, on her doorstep, with her keys still in her hand. It's a chilling detail. She was taken to Charing Cross Hospital, but was pronounced dead at 1:03 p.m.
Yeah, that detail about the keys, it really highlights how sudden and unexpected this attack was. And the fact that this happened on a seemingly quiet residential street in broad daylight, it added to the public's shock and fear. I mean, if it could happen to Jill Dando, could it happen to anyone?
The police response must have been enormous.
Oh, absolutely. It quickly became one of the biggest criminal investigations ever in Britain, Dando's fame, and the public outcry. It put huge pressure on the Metropolitan Police to find whoever did this.
Yeah, given that she was killed by a single gunshot to the head. It's understandable that the police initially thought this was a professional hit, perhaps by someone with ties to organized crime.
Yeah, and that's where the investigation went first. Some even speculated that it might have been revenge for her work on Crime Watch, where she helped put a lot of criminals behind bars.
Right, but the investigation didn't stop there, did it?
No, they also looked into Dando's personal life. They looked at ex-boyfriends who might have been jealous, people who might have held a grudge. And even the possibility that she had a stalker. Yeah, there were. There were reports that Dando had been followed in the past. But the police investigated those individuals and couldn't find a link to the murder.
So the investigation took a dramatic turn a year later when a local man, Barry George, became the prime suspect. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Barry George lived about half a mile from Dando's home, and he had a history of stalking women and some other offenses. So the police quickly became very interested in him. Some people have actually said that the intense pressure on the police to solve the case, combined with George's history, made him an easy target.
Yeah, he sounds like he fit the profile.
Yeah. And that's where things get controversial. He was arrested just over a year after the murder and charged with Dando's death. The prosecution built their case around a single particle of firearms residue that was found in the pocket of one of George's coats. That and his history of stalking and odd behavior led to his conviction in 2001. He was given a life sentence.
But his conviction was overturned, wasn't it?
Yes. After 7 years in prison, his conviction was overturned in 2008. The forensic evidence, which some people had always considered weak, was ruled inadmissible because there were concerns about contamination.
So if it wasn't Barry George, then who was it? Things seem to get even more confusing at this point. A lot of different suspects and theories have popped up over the years.
Well, one of the most prominent theories involved a possible link to Serbia a few weeks before she was killed. Dando had presented a television appeal for Kosovar Albanian refugees. This led some to believe that her murder might have been retaliation for the NATO bombing of a Serbian TV station.
Yes, I remember that. Some people even claim that a Serbian hitman had been hired to take her out.
Exactly. But even though they investigated it thoroughly, No real evidence was ever found to support this theory. In fact, it's been mostly debunked by experts. Nick Ross, who also presented Crime Watch, said the idea doesn't really make sense.
Right. And then there was that Man X theory. What was that about?
Oh, yeah. So there was a witness who reported seeing a man running from the scene who fit the description of a Serbian assassin named Milorad Ulamek. Now, Ulamek is actually a convicted murderer, serving a 40-year sentence in Serbia. This lead has been debated a lot, but nothing has been verified.
So many leads. But nothing concrete. It's a puzzle.
Even after Barry George was acquitted, the police continued to review the case. And while they haven't publicly named any new suspects, some sources say they now think Dando was killed by a professional assassin in what they call a hard contact execution.
What does that mean exactly?
It means the gun was pressed right up against her head when it was fired, which would muffle the sound and prevent blood splatter. This could explain why there wasn't much forensic evidence at the scene, and why it seemed like the killer got away so easily.
So it's like we're back to where we started. The case remains a mystery. Were there any other possible suspects or motives that the police looked into?
Well, they considered a wide range of possibilities, though some were more credible than others. They looked into the possibility of disgruntled criminals who had been featured on Crime Watch, investigated a potential stalker who might have been obsessed with Dando, and even thought about the possibility of a jealous ex-lover. But all those leads turned out to be dead ends.
It's almost as if the killer just vanished. Did the investigation find out anything about the murder weapon?
Forensic analysis of the bullet and cartridge case found at the scene suggests that the gun used was probably a converted replica or a decommissioned weapon. This has led some to believe that the killer might not have been a seasoned professional hitman, as a professional would likely use a more reliable weapon.
That makes you wonder if it could have been someone with a personal grudge against Dando, someone who maybe modified a weapon specifically for this purpose. It makes this already confusing case even more intriguing.
Exactly, and that's why Jill Dando's murder continues to be such a mystery. Despite all the years and all the investigations, we still don't know for sure who killed her or why.
Yeah, it makes you question everything. Was it random? Was it planned? Or something in between? It's hard to imagine we'll ever know for sure. But no matter who the killer was or why they did it, Jill Dando's murder left a huge mark, not just on the people who knew her, but on the entire country.
Yeah, she was. I mean, from everything I've read, she was really an exceptional person. Alongside her successful television career, she was known for her kindness, her infectious laugh, and her passion for what she did.
And I think that's why this case continues to affect people so strongly. Jill Dando represented a kind of innocence.
Yeah.
And her murder, like, it kind of shattered the idea that good people are safe,
Yeah.
even in a world where crime exists.
Yeah. And you know, her legacy continues. Her work on Crime Watch, her dedication to raising awareness about crime, and her optimism, it still inspires people.
And of course, her family has lived with this lack of closure for over 2 decades. They've never given up hope for justice and have always asked anyone with information to come forward.
Yeah, it really speaks to their strength and resilience. I mean, imagine dealing with the loss of someone you love and then having to live with the constant media attention, all the theories, and the frustration of not knowing who took her from you. It's unimaginable.
So let's try to talk about some of the positive things that came out of this tragedy.
Okay.
One of the most significant things was the establishment of the Jill Dando Institute of Crime Science at University College London.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, it's a world-leading research institute dedicated to reducing crime and improving criminal justice practices. It was set up in her honor to use scientific research and evidence-based approaches to create a safer world. It's really a fitting tribute to a woman who dedicated her career to highlighting the impact of crime.
It's amazing to think that something so positive emerged from something so awful. It says a lot about who Jill Dando was and what she stood for.
You know, there's also the Jill Dando News Initiative, which encourages young people to think about careers in journalism. It's another way to keep her memory alive and inspire future reporters.
So where does that leave us? After all this time, all the investigations and theories, Jill Dando's murder is still one of Britain's most perplexing unsolved cases. We may never know definitively who pulled the trigger or why.
Yeah.
But we can remember Jill Dando for the remarkable person she was. We can honor her by continuing to seek justice, supporting the causes established in her name, and never forgetting the impact she had on so many lives.
Absolutely.
I'm sure Simon and Tom will have a lot to say about this case in their weekly review on Sunday. But in the meantime, tune in tomorrow for another great true crime episode.